Du bist weg, oder was?
Läuft vielleicht, ich denke, schlafen.
Good night.
Gut, genau. Ja, dann
Good time to switch. All right. So let's do this in English, and let's hope that my English is not as bad as I think it is compared to my German, which is pretty weird to realize that my German has become better. I guess this is what we call being integrated in a country, fully integrated. Anyway, this talk is about iOS and OS 10, but it's really mainly about some tips and tricks and a lot about Game Center and StoreKit. I realized when I was, oh, by the way, I didn't mean to press on that, but yeah, that could be the integration of iOS and OS 10. That could be one of the options, but that's not exactly what we are going to see. It's a funny video on Wired from some dude who thought that would be the future of iOS, is having the whole OS 10 in iOS. Apparently, he didn't understand some concepts. Anyways, you know, the thing is, I've seen that in the past we had a talk about StoreKit. I remember. I will mention that later. But I don't think we had a talk about Game Center at Cocoahead, as far as I remember. So I will get into a little bit more details about Game Center later. Okay, but let's start. How did I end up? How did I end up? By the way, and also for the record for the camera, this is my real name, and everything all around is just bullshit. And so I'm mainly the guy behind the conference, but also on Pomcast.biz I have 2 Mac apps, Disk Alarm and Comments, and this is going to be my first real iOS app. So that's how I ended up working with those comment technologies. I ended up working with those comment technologies thanks to Fflp. Let me introduce you to Fflp. This is the name of the app. I'm not responsible for that. The designer is responsible for choosing the name. It's called Fflp because it's the sound that you make when you change pages, and you will understand in a few seconds why. Because I will show you. By the way, I need sound. I just realized, but I think the computer is going to be loud enough. So this is the iPhone version of the little game that I did for kids, or I should say actually that this is the iPhone version because the other one is now so old, and you could even argue that that there is even a bigger iPhone, except it's called an iPad. But in my case, it's really just a big iPhone because my app is really like many Android apps, iPad, tablet versions. This app is really kind of a bigger version. There are very little difference between the iOS and the iPhone, the iPhone and the iPad version. So this is what they call universal, I guess. Not really. What I call universal is this. This is the same app running on OS 10. Well, it's not actually the same app, but a lot of the code is common, and that's what I'm going to speak about. So the main difference, though, is from a user perspective that that's what the guy who had the OS 10 running in iOS didn't understand, is that iOS and OS 10 are two different beasts. So on iOS, when you press on that plus button, for example, what happens is that the store becomes on front of you because there is only one window at a time. On the Mac, though, you expect to have another window popping, an external window, which is coming and present basically the same thing as on iOS, but just in a separate window, and you can see both at the same time. You will see that in a second. The best way to introduce the app, because this will allow you to understand what I went through in all the technologies I played with, is by showing you my kids playing with my apps, because I figured out if I'm going to make a video about kind of a trailer about the app, which is running for like 1 minute, I'm going to use the best actor that I have at home, and also the cheapest one, my kids. So this is my little one, and if I press, you will see the rest of the... Key. So that's it. Among all the things I did over the past few years, these are probably my best products. I think I'm pretty good at it. I'm probably better than at developing. So anyways, you get the gist about this app. It's an app for very small kids, like 4 years old, 5 years old. There is a category, by the way, on the App Store. We are in the kids category, which is an amazing pain in the ass. I'm going to come back on that later. And this kids category has 3 ages differences. Like there is one called smaller than 5 years old, and then there is 5 to whatever 8, and then 8 to 12. The smaller than 5 years old, though, actually means 4 years old, because you can only submit apps for 4 years old, 4+. So there is 4+ and smaller than 5. So this is really an app we targeted really for 4 years old. For most of us adults, it's pretty boring. After you've swiped a little bit of time, you're like, huh, what's the gist of it? This is because, as grown-up, we are fucked up. Our creativity has been stopped at some time, for whatever reason, by school, by parents, by whatever, and we really cannot create anymore. Kids do amazing stuff with this app, and there is no rule. There are no rules. Anyway, the thing is that I was going to build an iOS app originally, but then the designer came at one point. His name is Jean-Marie Oriot. It's a French guy living in Belgium, so kind of fits with me. It's a listener of my podcast who got in touch with me after one point, and it's his idea, and the drawings are his drawing. Luckily, if I draw, it's going to be terrible. And he, at one point, he told me, what if we would do a Mac version of the app, because he's also a Mac lover. And I said, yeah, and he said, but we can do that later, and like, on the next day, I gave him a Mac app. And the reason why I could give him a Mac app on the next day is because a lot of the things that I was using was something that could, in the meantime, run on OS X the same way, which is pretty cool. So the main reason why I did the Mac version of this app, which is probably not going to sell at all, like many Mac apps, is that I love the Mac, and also that StoreKit support on the simulator is actually pretty limited. Actually, it's not. There is no StoreKit support on the simulator, as you might know. So that's a big pain in the ass to have to develop that every time on the device and enter your password and switch from your regular iTunes account to your test iTunes account password, and it drove me crazy. Game Center is pretty cool because Game Center works on the simulator, by the way, but still you still have to enter your password. I mean, you can type it, yeah, but if you want to test on the device, it's not as easy. And Game Center is pretty awesome because it allows you to share, it's really universal, like to share between iOS and OS X, way more than anything else that I know at Apple, except for iCloud. The difference is that Game Center works slightly better than iCloud. It doesn't mean it works, but it works slightly better. Which isn't hard when we know how good iCloud works. And we'll see that push notifications are common as well. Everything you learn about push notification on iOS, there is really no reason why you shouldn't use it on the Mac. It's the same. The big difference, though, and that's pretty amazing, is that you can totally spam your user without the user even realizing that, because there is no question popping to the user when the app starts. Do you want to have push notification or not? You will have push notification. Of course, the user can then go into system preference and turn it off, but the biggest question is, do they know that as a normal user? I think they don't. I guess most normal users on the Mac, I'm not saying they're stupid, but I guess most Mac users on the Mac don't even know what the system preferences are.
There's some you have no permissions on macOS, like in iOS?
You are not asked.
Okay.
Yeah. So you're not asked. And I'm trying to think of another idea. Like contacts, for example, is a good example. Contacts you have, a Mac app will ask you this. I think if I remember correctly, a Mac app will ask you this app wants to access your contact. But anyway, push notification it doesn't, which is weird in a way. And by the way, because I don't mention that in the talk, something else come out of my idea on iOS. We all remember the days where the calendar and the address book could be accessed without asking the permission. It drives me nuts when I think back in those times because this was crazy. Today there is still a crazy thing on iOS. Any app can record your picture without you knowing that. There is no question whatsoever. The only question you will have is, can I use the microphone? So if I record with AV Foundation, I did that. I submitted a bug to Apple. Just I was not smart enough to actually record the Apple guys because that would have been awesome. I would have had images from Cupertino. But I didn't think about this. So what I did is I programmed an app which you start the app, it records you 3 seconds, it uploads on the internet somewhere. That's it. I got you. The only country in the world where a permission is asked for video, and I'm not even kidding, is China. So for the rest of the world, you guys are spied by any apps. Obviously, when this app is found, Apple will kick you out of the App Store and probably will burn you or something. But the technological part of it is actually frightening. And the last reason why I did the Mac app is because I love the Mac. Maybe I mentioned that already, but I really do love the Mac. And as much as I love iOS, I would love to only do Mac because I love much more the platform. And I also love the fact of being able to work on the same machine that I am developing on, not having to plug that damn cable, not having to take that thing in the hand and type on the small keyboard. It's cool when you show it to your parents and your grandparents. It's way cooler than being a Mac developer, but I enjoy it. I enjoy the Mac more. Anyway, yeah. A big warning. What I'm going to speak about the Mac is pretty much App Store only. If I learned the last few months to kind of dislike the App Store or like the freedom or whatever of outside the App Store. This is all App Store. If you're going to use push notification, if you're going to use Game Center, if you're going to use App Store, in-app purchase, Store Kit, I'm going to make it. This is like iCloud MapKit. It's only App Store. So that's a big warning. Okay. I don't quite get. You have to slide this thing or what? Of type, whatever. Anyway, this is a little bit of my finer structure of the project. I might show you later a little bit how it works. So what I have is I have the common directory where my common files are. I'll come back later to that. I'm using the XC assets, but in a weird way. And then I have a folder for iOS, folder for Mac. I'm using Cocoaheads. I have a folder for the server, which I'll come back later, which is actually Helios for the push notification on iOS. And then submodules as well, because some things are not in Cocoaheads. So now I have a folder with, which, for example, sounds. When you swap, you've heard that in the video, you have different sounds, and you can choose which sound set you would like. The thing that I'm doing is I'm just referencing to that sound. From my iOS app and from my macOS app. Up until there, it's pretty trivial. You have a workspace with a bunch of projects in this. There are actually other projects. And you reference. Now it's fixed, but for a long time, Xcode 5.1, when you drag and drop something from there to there, it would crash, which was awesome. I always had to start Xcode 5 to fix that. So you see here that I'm actually using, so these are the different things, and I'm using actually the XC assets, but I'm not really using it. The main reason is that I filed a bug called XC assets reference from a workspace in a project can be found at runtime. That was awesome. I had this guy referenced in both projects, and I would start, and the app at runtime would say, I don't find the images. And the answer from Apple, besides the fact that I could do something wrong, was that XA assets aren't supported in a workspace. So I love the Ensure. Anyway, I don't really use them the way they are intended to be used. I just use them for the convenience of Xcode, the way Xcode shows you the files. So as you can see, I have them in my app, but they are in no target whatsoever. What I even do is I even go further and be more crazy is the XA assets and the image set conveniently, up until now at least, in the Finder they show up as folders. They don't show up as bundles or whatever. So it's pretty convenient because you can put whatever you want there. It's your own organization. The only thing this JSON cares about is are the two PNGs which are referenced in the JSON. The reason I'm speaking about the JSON is also because you will see that the interface of Xcode won't allow you to use JPEGs. It won't let you drag and drop it. So you might think you are smart and go in the JSON file, which is super trivial, and reference JPEG files. The problem is when you're going to run the app, Xcode is going to transform your JPEG in PNGs. Awesome. Brand new idea from Cupertino. Thanks guys. So there's no point in trying to use JPEGs with XA assets. I don't know why exactly, but because there are so many use cases where JPEGs makes more sense. Anyway, one thing is about UI image and NS image. They have so many things in common. I mean, they both are able to be in it with data. You might have a lot of reasons to not want to load images from the bundle directly. Like you might have reasons not to have this thing called image names directly, or not. I mean, you might do things like, I don't know, for example, apply some watermark or whatever, invert the colors or whatever. So init with data is actually a pretty good way of doing that. The next thing is that you should be careful about slightly different concepts on scaling. On iOS, there is this concept of you give it a scale, you say init with data scale, and then you can reference your add2x or your normal. On the Mac, it's a little bit different. It's two, I don't remember how it is, bitmap space, whatever workspace. It's basically two images in one TIFF file. So it's a different concept, but it works if you use things like, for example, a lot of things that I'm using is using iftarget, the typical thing. Imagine that share button that I was showing on iOS and on the Mac. It is the same. What I want people to do is to share their creations on Twitter, Facebook, and whatnot. So what they want to share is they want to share a title. That underscore, by the way, is NS localized string. It's a macro that I have since many years. Took that from Ruby, I think. I was bored to write NS localizable string and then don't put a comment or whatever. Anyway, and the big caps are constants. And then you have a URL and a screenshot. Those things are the same. The only difference is the screenshot is one time it's a UI image, one time it's a NS image. That's the only difference. So what I do is I do if target iOS. And so if you know a little bit of iOS, you might stop me and think like, what? There is no target iOS. There is target OS iPhone. And there is target iPhone simulator. And there is target Mac. So you might think, like I did, you are smart and you're going to do if target Mac else. The problem is the simulator is target Mac. Because the simulator is a Mac. So what you want to do is in your code is you want to do every time if target OS iPhone or simulator, unless I miss something. But anyway, so I have this target iPhone, which by the way allows me to let you enter in a very delighting part of this show, which is having a trip together with me to this amazing header called targetconditionals.h, which is one of the most awesome ones. Let's get ready. You have time? Okay, that's it. if you find your way over there, the only thing I found really interesting is that I was sure about that at Apple there are some machos. And so I found that guy, it's Macho Man, the wrestler. So I could dance Macho Man. I really read Macho the first time, and then I realized, oh, it's Mac. Oh, okay. Anyway, that was for the fun part. So what you do is, on iOS, what I do is I use the UI Activity View controller. which is a view controller. That's interesting because on the Mac it's not like that. And then, by the way, that's the little trick which I had to Google also to actually put a subject in this email. Because if you just pass an array of items, the way UI Activity View Controller works is it will get, it will see that's a string, that's a URL, and that's an image. So it will compose out of the string plus add the URL. On Twitter, it will add it as a URL attachment, but on the mail, it will just add it on the mail, blah, blah, blah. You can do whatever you want there. I couldn't find a way to change the subject of the mail. And the way to do it is just to say set value for key subject, but it's the only way you can access to this property is with KVC. Once you know that, it's perfectly fine. Then I have on iOS I have a completion handler. This is a little bit boring. Then I present it, blah blah blah. On the Mac it's a little bit different, but it's kind of the same. The difference is sharing service picker is not a view controller. It's from an object, and it works with those old delegate thingy, which is not as cool as using blocks. But the point of that is that the code, the point of this whole thing is that the code that I will have here and the code that I will have in this delegate is going to be the same. It's going to be exactly the same. I'm going to do something, I don't remember what, but I'm going to do something which is the same on iOS and on Mac. So of course, obviously, doing common technologies is not always, it's a lot of time ifs, but not always. Many times, it's a good shortcut. By the way, that's what I'm going to show you is just an example because I actually don't need this player ID thingy, but it's a good example of when I was learning Game Center, I obviously did a few things wrong. And at one point I was like, okay, I'm going to create an achievement. I'm going to get the achievement and check if the player ID is equal to my player. And at one time, I think Max, Chris, told me, dude, you're stupid. You're only getting your own achievements. And I was like, oh, okay. Thank you very much. But in the meantime, I was looking for this property called achievement.playerID in gkachievement.h, and this guy, gkachievement.h, this class is on iOS and on macOS. The big difference is on iOS, there is a property called playerID, and on OS X, there is a property called nothing. It's the same class, but just there's not the property. So you will end up, in many cases, on StoreKit, I think there are cases like that as well, where in one class you have the property, on the other one you don't have it, so you have to work your way around it. You can really feel like the way Apple is developing those things, not necessarily at the same time. Like at one time they develop for the Mac, and then for the iOS, and then for the Mac, then for iOS. Again, in this case, it's not a big deal. They probably even realize after all, actually we don't need it on. After they shipped iOS, they were like, oh, we don't need it, so let's not put it on iOS. It's just very disturbing. So what happens when it's not exactly the same? Another example about not exactly the same. In StoreKit, I use, what is it called? Hosted content. It's a new thing since iOS 7. It allows me not to have any server. The images, so basically in Fflp, you get 4 characters, and if you want more characters, or if your kids want more characters, they go at you and they're like, I want more characters, I want more characters. So you go in the store and you buy an app store more characters. You buy at least 1 character, I hope, and on the next day the kids come back and say again, I want another character, and so after 3 days you're running out of luck because I only have 3 characters. But our plan is to have another character every month or something like that with the designer. Anyway, what I do is I download those from Apple's server with this new thing called SK download. So I create a payment queue, and I'll come back to StoreKit later. And what I do in my payment queue, when I get this delegate called updated downloads, which means basically, hey, I found downloads for this StoreKit, so the guy has paid already. Now it's time to give him what he has paid for. So I check out in the downloads, and I do a couple of things, and then the next thing I do is I check that I'm on iOS because, as you're going to see in a moment, the problem is that, so yeah, I need to finish my transaction anyway. I gave the ellipsis here means I downloaded the image, and once it's downloaded, like I'm finishing my transaction, and I'm over for StoreKit. The problem is I need this transaction, and this transaction is, in the case of iOS, it's in the download, because that's the only thing I get. I don't get the transaction in the payment queue. I just get it in the download. On the Mac, there is no transaction on an SK download. Same thing. So what I did is a little bit stupid, but I couldn't find another way to do it. Is I went all over my default queue for my transactions, and basically what I did is in those transactions in the payment queue, I have the downloads. And I'm looking, hey, is it you? Do you have this download? And if I have it, then yeah, I do my business. Anyway, it's a bit tricky sometimes. You have to work around the things. By the way, a good tip that I got from other people and that I will further give is when you find a bug at Apple, the first thing you do is you report it. The second thing you do is you work around it. Don't do what I did. Also, many people probably did make the mistake of like waiting that Apple fixes it, because there is a good amount of chance that they will never ever fix it. So move away, work around it, but report it before. So another way of doing common technology, common code is using categories. I have this example for images. I told you UI image, NS image. For me, they are called FL image. And I actually don't care what they are. My category cares. For example, I have this category image name. By the way, I did that on purpose. I had a great religious talk with some other developers about you should prefix your category methods. I'm going to be honest, I don't really do it. I understand why you have to do it, because you might crash. But I don't know what people do, if they do it or not. Show of hand, who uses categories? No one then? All right, who prefix them, the methods? You do? Okay, nobody else. I don't know, it's another religious thing. But I understand the problem is if two categories are running with the same method, or if Apple adds a method which has the name you had, that could be dangerous. So yeah, I kind of skipped a slide, but basically I was having twice the same category, but depending on the platform, it's another code. Using define, I did one of the nasty trick that I did was to fake it on what platform to use the same code. So what do I mean by that? On iOS, there is this cool thing called application did finish launching with options. So I already had that code actually, and that code was checking something in launch options in the dictionary. So it was checking the dictionary. With a C function. Doesn't happen very often, but in this case I thought, okay, what the heck, it's enough. And so in the common code, what I had is I had this function would check if the parameter is valid without getting too much into the details. It's just about checking the URL key. I'm checking, so it's when you're calling the app with whatever, my app semicolon / 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I'm checking actually the URL itself. So when I arrived on the Mac, it's a little bit different. You don't have this did finish launching with options. You have to implement handle URL event with reply event, and then the way to get the URL is actually, oh yeah, for one thing. First thing is what I did on the Mac is I defined this key. Why not? I defined this. I defined the key that exists on iOS. I defined it because I want to use the same code. So why not? I mean, unless Apple really redefines that, then the next time I will compile, I might have a problem. But so what? I mean, I will see it. Many of those things I realize could be potentially, some of those things could be potentially dangerous. But what's a life without danger? Anyway, on the Mac, it's actually quite funny the way you have to do it. You have to pass the key directed object and then the string value, and then once you have that, it's not like so you have the string, which is the URL, and so what I'm doing is I'm passing basically the user info on the Mac app. I'm passing the user info as is, and my My common code doesn't know what it just receives a dictionary. All right, let's move on to iTunes Connect. It's actually funny. This is Game Center, which is really universal, unlike its icon, which is not universal. So this is a very beautiful icon, which I love. And if anybody knows who is responsible for that, I want his name. It's probably Johnny Ive, so you should stick with hardware and stop touching my software. Anyway, if I ever find this designer, this is what I'm going to do with him. And I'm going to leave this icon for the rest of the talk. The thing is, it's funny because on OS X, this is still the icon. And all the screenshots that I'm going to show you now, they have still this amazing letter, which I love. So I'm a big fan of skeuomorphism, and I will stay a big fan of skeuomorphism. All right, so on iTunes Connect, what you do is you define a group. So these are my apps. The reason I have different apps is because I have some beta version, dev version. It's a little bit complicated, and I could have done it another way. The fact of the matter is I can show you that I can use the same Game Center group on iTunes Connect for 6 apps. And 3 of those apps are iOS apps, and 3 of those apps are Mac apps, which is pretty cool. So you can share a leaderboard between more apps, and it also means mix between iOS and Mac OS. And for us, it's very important. So what you do is you just go in iTunes Connect, you add the leaderboard. So one of our leaderboard is the best sharers, which I will come later in the talk. Later in the talk, I explain you that it probably was best sharer. And then I have an achievement, which is called shares, which is when you have shared that amount of time, like 10 or 20 times, you get a free character. That's basically our idea was every time you share to Facebook, we give you 1 point, and once you've shared like 10 times or 20 times, we give you a free character. But I'll come back later. In the meantime, a little look at Game Center, how it works. For many of you, you understand how it works. That's this horrible thing on iOS. And now let's go over different things on both platforms. You have your me card, so to say, who you are, how many points you have, how many friends you have. Yeah, and then you have this. So beautiful, crap. By the way, this here says something in Spanish that says sandbox. And oh yeah, it's time to learn Spanish. When I was doing the screenshot, I was in Spanish, so anyways. And normally on the Mac, where it says me, it's also saying me sandbox, but I took those screenshots from my not sandbox. And so on the Mac, this is how it looks with my good friend Max Christ. As you can see, he plays a lot of games. On iOS, I don't have any friends. It's a little bit sad. On the simulator, it's very hard to have friends. Yeah, you can actually. The guys you are testing the app with, but it's harder to have friends on the simulator. I don't care because I'm not friends with the simulator anyway. These are the games you have, and as you can see on Game Center, it really mixes your iOS game and your OS X games, and this is where you can see the big difference between how many games there are on one platform and how many games there are on the other platform. And again, it's the same thing on iOS, and I think it's pretty cool because you really have both. I think I skipped a slide. Wasn't very important, I think. So, and then there are challenges, retos in Spanish. I'm glad you came to learn Spanish. Yeah, it's a Spanish course. Yeah. Bienvenidos. Vamos a seguir el talk en español. All right. So yeah, and then you have friend requests, and it's really the same. That's my point. It's very, very much the same in many ways. One other cool in Game Center are the banners. On OS X, they still look gorgeous. On iOS, it's okay. To be honest, it's okay. The icon still sucks, but it's okay. It's very nice. It comes from the top. When you start an app on iOS, by the way, and on the Mac also, the first thing it tells you it's hey, welcome back. So my test user is called Timmy Jim. Originally, my nickname being Stuff, I had created an account called, and I had this iTunes Connect account for a user in the US, so I called it Stuff US. and at one point, my designer, when I was doing the screenshot for the app, he said, "You realize we are making an app for kids, and you are calling your user stuff us? It's probably not a good idea." So since I'm not willing to stuff anybody, we changed that to Timmy Jim. Anyway, it shows you the thing, and the way it works is with GK achievement has this pretty cool thing, a pretty cool boolean called shows completion banner. And so every time there is an achievement, you can also have a banner automatically shown to you. Blah, blah, blah. That's exactly what I wanted to show. And the other thing, it will look with the look and feel of Game Center. I'm saying on purpose any message you want, but the reviewers will catch you probably. Like if you write something which has nothing to do with Game Center, I'm pretty sure the review team is going to tell you, huh? No, 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 no. Like your mom is coming or whatever. But it's pretty cool, I mean, that there is this way of integrating in the system, so to say. So how do you report achievement in Game Center? Again, this is really common talk, but it's also a little bit about Game Center. You allocate it with the identifier. The identifier is the one you gave it in iTunes. It's basically, in the case of Fflp, it's grp.point, I think shares or whatever. They always start with grp points when they are group shares, which is a little bit weird, but I guess there are some internal reasons at Apple for having that. And then what I do is I change the person complete. Why do I cap it to 100? Because otherwise it will crash. That's pretty awesome. Thank you, Apple, for that. So if you try to put more than 100 as a percent, it will crash. So cap it. Otherwise, you're going to have a problem. And then I ask show completion banner, as I show. If I don't put this guy to yes, it will just send the completion, but it won't notify the user. In this case, it says to the user, hey, you've won the character or whatever. You worked through that level or whatever. And then you report achievements. You can report more at once. In this case, I'm only reporting one, so I'm sending a one element array. The way it works is that it comes back with a completion handler. Luckily, it is asynchronous. And then you do whatever you want in this guy. Hopefully you have no error. If you have an error, you just kill yourself or whatever. All right. Stop me up anytime if you have questions. That's a way to showing the leaderboard. The gist of it is that it's a little bit different on iOS and on the Mac. The reason is that they work a little bit differently on iOS. They work independently, like they show something in the system, and on the Mac you need to provide them a window. It's just a different way of working the things. Okay, a nice trick, if you want to show the Game Center profile, there is no API for that. Well, actually, there is some kind of API, which is kind of hidden. It's a guy who works now at Apple who gave me that. Anyway, it was during the talk, the tech talk in Berlin. He showed me one of the previous apps. It worked before he was at Apple, and he told me all you have to do is open this URL. Game Center semicolon me. Game Center is just the URL scheme, and then there are other things than me. That's what I do on the Mac, as you can see. On iOS, I do it a little bit differently. On iOS, I actually use the same URL because it's the same URL. That's the cool thing about it. But I use this IASK open URL specifier. Does anybody know where it's coming from? Ever heard of that? This is coming from my good friend Altwin Gens from in-app settings kit, because I'm using in-app settings kit on iOS, which I think is pretty awesome. It gives you, luckily it doesn't look like that anymore. This is so iOS 3-ish, but sadly now it looks like iOS 7. So it's pretty cool. It allows you to have basically you use your bundle settings of bundle, And the settings that you have outside of the app, in the settings app, you have them also inside, but not only that, you can add things like that, for example, because you cannot add a URL in a... so what I do is when you tap on... I should have put a screenshot of the app. When you tap on one column, it opens this URL. So check it out, in-app settings kit. It's very cool. Like mostly anything Artwin does, actually, except when he criticizes me. So let's go into the rejection story of Apple. That's always fun. I submitted the app a couple of weeks ago and waited, interestingly enough, on iOS 10 days, which is very long in the meantime. And on the Mac, I waited 36 hours, which is very short. I never heard that. Anyway, different things came back, which is interesting. On the Mac, they didn't say anything about Game Center. And remember, I told you it's the exact same thing, the exact same workflow, but definitely it wasn't the exact same reviewer. One guy had probably a better day with his wife the day before than the other one, because that sucker on the iOS team told me, "We found out your app uses Game Center in an unstandard manner, which is not in compliance with the App Store review guidelines. The intended use of Game Center is to complement the game apps or game functionality within an app. However, we noticed that your app does not contain any gameplay, sucker, or game features." So the problem with this guy is that he is actually, just like we are all, a grown-up, an adult. It's not as easy as you think it is to leave this place. Just for the video, there's a guy who's trying to leave. Tschüss. Anyway, the biggest problem here is they don't get it. Just like many adults, I'm showing the app, they are like, "Oh, there is no goal in the game." And I'm like, well, yeah, there is no goal in the game. That's exactly the goal. I mean, anybody who has kids, they will give them those, whatever, Lego or wood blocks. And on the box, there is a truck on the box. But it's totally cool if your kid builds a house instead of the truck, which is on the house, on the box.
That leads me to a main question I have. The point is, I think the Game Center could be, with its basic functionality, the thing to bring to create any social awareness for apps, for example, bring people together. Yeah. You can use it for it. The question is, if you go public with it, perhaps Apple tells you something like that and project it, because you're using the Game Center for any kind of social.
Yeah, I know.
Question is this possible? Do you think they will reject it? Are there any restrictions?
So here's the thing: we will, yeah, it's a hard question, because we were thinking like, okay, what do we do now with Game Center? I was speaking with the designer once we got rejected. And by the way, before I forget, the rest of the email was that would be appropriate to modify it or remove Game Center. Yeah, right, okay. So if we remove Game Center, it's easy. We just remove Game Center. There's no Game Center anymore in the app. Just everything I did is just for the trash. But so we were thinking, if we don't remove it, we have to come up with another way of giving an achievement to people. Like for example, we're thinking like after you use the app for so and so many minutes or whatever. And we were thinking about a few things, but obviously we don't want to do. Everybody we show the app at, the first thing they say is, what would it be if you get a point once you match the characters? And the first thing I'm thinking is like, it's exactly not what we want. The goal of the game is to, it's a mix and match. It is to mix. It is not to match, actually. It is more to mix and to do weird things like my daughter, my 6-year-old, was doing at one point in the video. I don't know if you remember. She's like in the middle of two characters, and she was like, "Hey, look! It doesn't have any legs anymore." And I was like, "Oh, that's weird. I didn't think about this, actually. But it's because I'm not a kid anymore, so I don't have any creativity anymore." So it's hard. I mean, obviously we kind of screw or rape the way Game Center is intended to be used. On the other hand, there are apps out there that gives you point when you like their page on Facebook or something like that, whatever, something around those lines. So it's a discussion with Apple as usual. The review process is a big discussion between human beings. So we still don't know if we're going to do that. We haven't really figured out yet. But I will have other rejection later. So let's talk about StoreKit. In-app purchase. The problem with in-app purchase is that it's not universal in a way that you need to duplicate everything. So the Fflp characters are every time an in-app purchase. The problem is now I need two in-app purchase. I need one on iOS and one on macOS, which totally sucks because it doesn't make any sense. It's the same freaking thing. So the way it looks in Xcode is that. Thank you very much. That's awesome, and I will explain that. Besides for the fact that I have a different version for my own development, and then for the beta testers, I also have a free version and a paid version. The reason I have the free version is if I want some journalists to speak about the app, I'm not expecting them to give me a buck to speak about my app, so I implemented a system which allows me to unlock a free version of the... And that's another thing, that's another problem actually. Which I'll come back later, but imagine you have a macOS app and then you have an iOS app, and maybe you have two variants of the app. Maybe you have, I'm still considering having a kids and a non-kid version of the app. And I'll come back later about why about that. So the other thing which is a problem is that in Xcode, or actually I should say in application loader, this is the app that you use to upload your in-app purchases, but also to upload your files, your package. So the image that I'm downloading are in a PKG, in a package. So they are in Xcode. So I need multiple uploads, and so I need multiple schemes. It's a bit of a mess. Yeah, and the next thing is again for the free app and the paid version, the free version and paid version. It would be nice, and I filed a browser about that at Apple. It would be nice if we would have a way in the API to say it's okay. This in-app purchase is free. That would be just a boolean and say, okay, the guy doesn't have to pay. No, Apple thought it was a smart idea for me to have to duplicate all my freaking in-app purchases. So for every character in Fflp, I have 4 in-app purchases. iOS and Mac, free and not. It sucks. Furthermore, if you are a regular user of my apps, imagine you are that crazy guy who had both the iOS and the Mac app. There's probably going to be 3 guys on the world which has that, but imagine there is one guy. He buys a character on iOS, and then he starts on the Mac, and he expects, I'm guessing he expects that character to be there because he paid for it. The problem is he paid for it on iOS, not on macOS. So there is no technical way for me to say, okay, the guy paid already. So the bold way would be to say, I'm sorry, Apple doesn't allow that, you have to pay it already. But as we all know, people won't take that as an explanation. The problem is never Apple. The problem is always us. Where do you? I still don't get where you have to play. I think you just have to tap, actually. I'm swiping like crazy. So what I did is, and I think it's one of the other reasons Apple rejected me, is I needed a way to synchronize the purchase. I could use iCloud. I could store like whatever the transaction number on iCloud or something like that and retrieve it. Really, I wanted to spare the stress of iCloud. So what I did is I use a Game Center achievement. So, but I think Apple haven't seen that already. But the thing is, when you buy a character on iOS, hey, you have an achievement. And when you are on macOS, I check, hey, this guy has an achievement. He bought the app, and I unlocked the free version. And so all of a sudden, the guy starts the store, and there is a free version of the app. There's also the paid version, just in case he really wants to pay. I don't want to forbid people paying me, sending me money. But it's also a hard decision. Obviously, I might be a little bit fool to like give for free something which probably people have to pay normally. But I really saw it as a support problem. I saw Probably people complaining and saying, "Oh, I gave you $1. I know it's a lot of money." And now I have to pay it again. So I wanted to spare the stress. All right, in-app purchase. In January 26, 2012, there is a guy who gave a talk here at Cocoaheads, in-app purchase. So go check out, the slides are there. The only thing is, of course, it's a little bit outdated. But it's not terribly updated. This storefront thingy doesn't exist anymore, I guess.
I guess I updated that in a bit. I'm working on iOS in-app purchase app.
Okay.
So I will.
So what you were just saying is that the next talk at Cocoaheads will be about StoreKit in 2014. But Michael didn't hear that anyway. So he's right now he's in virtual reality land. You should film this guy. That's a little bit over the top. Anyway, the interesting part is this talk, obviously, in 2012 couldn't speak about iOS 7. That would have been awesome. Insider. In-app purchase on iOS 7 is different in many ways. And one way is that the receipt is just like the exact same receipt as on the Mac. What I mean by that is that the in-app purchase you bought are in the receipt of your app. Just like on macOS. It was always like that on macOS, and now it's the same. So that's what I'm doing a lot, actually. Yeah, so basically, pretty much all the code about in-app purchase is in this file called fflpstore.m, except the UI, because I do pretty much the same. I want to show you one piece of code, and it's not code. It's a receipt, so it's a little bit frightening at the beginning.
Yeah, we had a very interesting talk with Thorsten Kara about the coding of macOS receipts,
yeah.
Remember?
Yeah, there's another one. I should have mentioned that there is macOS checking the receipts on macOS or something like that. There was a talk like that. It was a few months ago.
It was so complicated that he told us that around only 20% of all macOS apps checking whether there's a receipt, but it doesn't code it and look whether it's valid.
Yeah,
Don't check it.
Yeah,
just looks whether it's there or not.
Well, so I have 3 Mac apps now, the 2 Mac apps that are out there, plus this one, and I check this on every single Mac apps. But it is a pain in the ass. It is a big pain in the ass. Anyways, the fact of the matter is that the new thing in iOS 7, and it was already on the Mac like that since the beginning of the App Store, is this part here. So on the top, there is just your identifier. This here is just a version number of the app. And this is something else, which I don't remember what it is because it's NS data. But the interesting part is inside, this is an array of in-app purchases. As you can see here, this is the identifier I'm using. I decided to go, and you're not obliged to do that, you can use whatever identifier you want, but I decided to go with the identifier of my apps plus a number after, which is the number of the character. Like this is the 7th character. And this is the what is that? The transaction ID, I think, and the purchase date or something like that. And everything is inside. So this is why I don't understand the next slide, which is the button restore versus the button restore all. So this is Fflp as it standard up until recently. And so this is when you haven't bought an app yet. It's obviously more expensive in Switzerland, but that's totally fine because they have more money. It's very interesting, the different levels of payment. So level 1 is 1 Swiss franc, and it's 89 cents or 99 cents. I chose to go, by the way, 89 cents, because I'm sure for many people the difference between 89 cents and 99 cents is just terrible. Anyways. When you buy the app, the character, I know you bought it. It's in the receipt. It's in the freaking receipt. So I'm not showing you the price anymore. I'm showing you a restore. And that's for every single character. So when you swipe on every single character, you either see a price, which means you haven't bought it yet, or you see a restore button. So So that's what I call one in-app purchase at a time. And Apple said, nope, we don't want that. And I was like, what? Are you what? And then I started tweeting about it, and everybody was telling me, oh, but of course, dude, you need a restore all button. And so I have this restaurar todo, but I told you it's Spanish learning today. Which, by the way, when you swipe, it's hard to show you. Maybe I can show you later. When you swipe, this guy is moving, but this guy is staying in the middle. And so when you click on this guy, I'm restoring every single one. And of course, it's cool because you restore all your purchase in one time. But the thing which is really weird for me is that Apple says you need that button, restore all, even if the user doesn't have bought anything. If the user hasn't bought anything yet, you still have to showing him restore all, which is not going to do anything, which is not going to restore anything because he hasn't bought. And what I don't understand is I'm pretty sure they think this way because in iOS 6 and before it was harder, or there was no way of knowing what you bought or whatever. It was different anyway. You probably know that more than I do. You had to store some things on your server or organize.
Yeah, you had to store things on your server, and there was no. Oh, wait, when you switch from you have a paid app, you switch to free or freemium, there was no way you could tell.
Yeah, where the in-app purchase were. What happened to the Apfelschorle? It has been taken in hostage. I'm gonna have to take all this sugar in my blood. Could be dangerous for you guys. Anyway, oh yeah, by the way, yeah, that was reject 2. Now let's go to reject 3. By the way, Game Center rejected on iOS, not rejected on Mac. Restore consequent rejected on both. Both the exact same remark. There is no restore button. On macOS, by the way, I didn't add a restore button because on macOS, this is another thing I love. You don't have to clutter your UI. There is this thing really cool called the menu bar. And I have a menu item says store, restore all items. So I don't have to clutter my UI with yet another button. Who's your daddy? Yeah. Update your app to require parental permission or incorporate the parental gate before the user can leave the app or engage in commerce. When they say the user, they mean the kid. And ensure that the parental gate cannot be disabled. Oh, by the way, I just realized that this last sentence, I didn't really read it, so I guess I should change something in my code. I will explain you why. I just took this one for real now. And so just like with Game Center, you can also remove these features. Like, of course, if you want, you can not sell any character. It's totally fine if your app is only free. Or it's totally fine if nobody knows about your app because they cannot share about it.
But yes. Your rating is 4+. That means you have a, while you are pressed to include the parental gate. So you have the lowest rating, so it's free for all kids.
No, it's not about free. It is exactly because I am in the kids category. If I wasn't in the kid category, that's why I was saying I might consider doing 2 apps. Even more since I just understood this last part. Cannot be disabled now. It's clicking. Okay. Because the problem is, so what I do is, and what I had to do, I wanted to spare that. So originally, like you see in the video, by the way, I hope they are not going to now and the next time tell me, oh, in the video we see that you can do. Well, I wanted to do it like in the video. Instead, what I need to do now is I need to do that. So imagine this is the simulator and these are 2 fingers. Obviously, when you press on any of that button, then I don't start sharing or the app, but here's what happens. You see that? Swipe up, you have to use 2 fingers, which on the simulator is a little bit hard. And then you swipe up, and then you see this thing. And yeah, I don't go in the preference, sadly. Yeah, there was a bug. And also, yeah, I wasn't finished, I was developing that. And when you press anywhere else, when you don't press, then it goes away. The idea is the kid pressing like crazy. There is no way a kid is gonna, well, we hope, swipe with 2 fingers. What I didn't show, I think, not even later, yeah, I'm going to speak you about Moms with Apps. That's an interesting website. What I didn't show is that if you go in the settings now, I have a switch called disable gate, disable parental gate, but I just read that I'm not able to disable it. So I don't know. I will leave this disabled definitely in the beta. For when I develop, it drives me nuts every time to have to swipe up. But in the final version, I'm in front of a serious problem, because what the guy from Apple, what's the name of that very important guy at Apple doing the UI and everything? John Galenzi. John Galenzi told me in December in Berlin, when I told him, well, it's a pain in the ass if for people downloading that. For kids, I understand, but if I'm downloading that, me not being a kid, if I want to play with the app, I'm still considered as a kid. He told me, well, submit the app in the kid category and in the non-kid category. Then I told him, yeah, but it means I need 2 bundle ID, because there is no way to do that. He said, yeah, do 2 bundle ID. I don't know if you realize what it means, but having 2 bundle ID means that I'm not going to have 4 in-app purchase, but 6. And it starts to be very funny. So I don't know what we're going to do. Anyway, Moms with Apps is a website which gives you a lot of different ideas of how to implement the parental gate, because the problem is this parental gate is a very good idea from Apple, but they just tell you to implement something. And something can be, for example, hey, to continue, swipe right with 2 fingers. That's basically what I do. So we imagine kids cannot read, and so they don't know what they have to do. I'm pretty sure they will look at their parents, and they will understand how to swipe and to read that very funny part where you can click on that buy button. But anyway, that's, yeah. It's the best way Apple found to, yeah, basically throw the baby with the water. Anyway, the other option is, hey, parent, what's 46 plus 21? The problem is I'm pretty sure many kids can solve this and many parents cannot solve this. So that's why I didn't win this pass, because seriously, I think many parents probably are any smarter than they're 4 years old. And so, are you an adult? What is 20 minus 5? Oh, fuck. Yeah. Darling, are you an adult? What's 20 minus 5? Anyway, yeah, you have to do something, and the least worst I can find was this swipe thingy. Yeah. And now I'm just sad that I cannot skip it. Anyway, next thing, slide 35 of 41, is notifications. So push notifications use the payloads, as some of you might know. So a payload is basically a JSON string. And it's the same on iOS and on the Mac. It is exactly the same. So this is why I'm processing this whole thing in the command part. Yeah, basically not doing anything. And server side is also the same, exactly the same. Except for one thing, which is the certificate that you have to create. It's just because these are 2 different apps, app ID, bundle ID, so you have to create a certificate for your Mac app and a certificate for your iOS app. I don't even think it's really actually too different than if it's iOS or Mac. It's just different because it's 2 different apps. For iOS, there are many platforms, many software as a service. There is Parse, there is Urban Airship, zeropush.com, pushover.net. Just Google for, if you Google for push notification service, whatever, you'll find a dozen of it, a ton of it. The problem is for the Mac, there is not a single one. Nobody is doing that for the Mac. It probably means what it means. Nobody cares about the Mac. Most of those folks basically really don't care about the Mac. So what I used is I used Helios. Helios, you can find it at helios.io if you Google for Helios and Matt. So this is from Matt. The problem, Matt, M-I-T-T, Matt Thompson. The problem is it's problematic, if not dead, because it belongs to Heroku. And I just learned a few days ago when I was at NS conference that Matt doesn't work for Heroku anymore, I think. And so that's the reason why there is no updates anymore. It works, it still works, but there are a few funny things in the code, like you don't understand why this compose message, which is on the screenshot, doesn't appear in your code, so you think you are stupid, you didn't know how to configure, you look around for the code, then you go on GitHub, you look in the Ruby code, in the gem, and at one point you find this line of code that says, if false. And you're like, okay. So if false, show the compose message button. But yeah, so probably he didn't have time to implement that thing and made the screenshot before, and then he broke something, I don't know. Interesting. But yeah, anyway, Elios is pretty cool still. Yeah, I love Matt, but the problem I have with Matt is that he has so many projects starting and just leave them after a while. So that's why I would seriously consider using something from Matt, because as awesome as he is, I have the feeling that nothing is ever really finished. Besides AF networking is probably the only example which is pretty damn solid. Okay, another common thing is using the same credits.rtf. So on the Mac, it's pretty simple. You have this file called credits.rtf. It's just a stupid rich text format file. You put in there that you have developed this with blah, 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 blah. And I thought on iOS it would be cool if I, in some part of my UI, show the credits as well. And I didn't want to duplicate the code. So what I did is two things. First thing, what I wrote in this text there is common. I'm not writing, hey, you are on iOS or you are on the Mac. So I'm trying to, like, for example, I wrote, this is discussable, but discover the other platform at Fflp, because I couldn't write discover iOS or discover Mac, so I didn't know how to code it. And the second thing is I implemented a view controller on my iOS app, which basically does something which is, I think, new since iOS 7, if I recall correctly, or iOS 6, which is that I basically, this is very slow. I'm loading this credits file from the bundle, loading that in NS data, and then what I do is I lock in it with data. I think this is the new thing in iOS 7. It was already there since a long time on the Mac, but it's new in either iOS 6 or iOS 7. You can init with data NS mutable string, and it will read the whole RTF, and that's pretty cool. And then I write it bigger, for example. The whole thing, I make it bigger because it was too small, I think, on iOS. And then, yeah, if there is an error, I'm doing something. Should do something else, actually. And then what I do is I just set up my text view to be this attributed string. And that's it. So I have a text view. Originally, what I did is I was loading this in a web view, the credits RTF directly. You can do that. Just load this URL here in the text in a web view. But then there was some serious problem of scrolling or whatever. It wasn't really working. And then some guy at Apple in Berlin at the Tech Talk gave me this trick. Kindly recommend to whenever you are at a Tech Talk or at the WWDC, just go in the labs and have all your problems fixed with them and learn from them. Just try to find the smart ones. It's not always easy. All right, so we're reaching almost the end. I have a couple of slides. The good and the bad that I learned about that is that the same code doesn't always mean half the work. But it definitely means twice the bugs. So if you have a bug, there is a good amount of chance that you will have the bug twice. But that's not necessarily a good thing, because for one thing, when you fix it twice as fast, which is pretty cool. And for a second thing, you can identify where the bottleneck is faster. And when you see the bug on Mac OS, and that you are lucky enough that no user have seen it yet on iOS, you can fix it beforehand. Yes?
General question to the problem with clicking and on-touch events. How do you handle them? There was a very funny and good first page on the computer and technique this month.
Oh, you mean when I swipe? What do I do on the Mac?
Yeah, what do you take? No, anti-clicking. You have on touch.
Yeah.
On touch and signed up events for the buttons on iOS, and you have click on Mac.
Yeah.
How do you handle it?
Do you mean for the buttons or for the click?
For the buttons.
So for the buttons on the Mac, it's actually everything. It's a touch up. It's a click down, click up, click. What is it called? Not click up.
You just make the decision, switch, and handle different events.
Yeah. No, I don't. I just. Well, the whole UI code is different.
Okay.
Obviously. Yeah, that's if it's your question. So I'm calling the same method at the end, which does the work, but the UI code itself. The only thing is, sometime on the Mac, I'm using a lot of what are they called? Bindings. I'm using a lot of bindings because I like them, even though sometimes they are a little bit risky. And also sometimes I'm just dragging, dropping, having an IB action in some of my command code.
This was the first thing of the Computer and Technique article.
Yeah.
The editor says, "Oh, that's a real what I had in Apple. I'm sitting in front of my MacBook and do things like that. Doesn't work."
Yeah, but that's funny that I didn't speak about that. Maybe I should mention that. I'll mention that later when I'm showing the app. I have to speak about the page controller because this is a different implementation on iOS and on macOS. If you please try to remember me that in 3 slides, because then I will switch to Xcode. It's going to be easier. So an example of this is, again, my store code is in the same thing. So if it's going to break twice. And one example that I had is in the store code. I had at one point this amazing code checking for what I'm passing from an object, what kind of an object is. And this is not really fail yet up until I show the next line, which is the rest of the code. And so I had a bug, and I was looking for the bug, and I was going deep into my code and stepping in, and so on and so forth. And at one point, I realized that it is really, really hard for an object to be at the same time an NS number and an NS array. So obviously, this wasn't supposed to be AND, but it was supposed to be OR. This is the kind of code that you look for an hour, even though it's super simple, or at least 30 minutes. A few things I learned, which I should have shown one after the other, is it's a little bit mean from me, but I don't know if I'm gonna if I want to work with StoreKit anymore in the future, and Game Center I'm not sure either. The sandbox, I knew already that it was a nightmare, but it's confirmed. And the thing that I learned again is that the thing that I like about the things that you don't like is that you have to test, to try it once. You have to play around with it. I mean, to know what the pains are of those different technologies, and to know the next time that I'm going to have a project, am I going to use Game Center? Am I going to use StoreKit? Am I going to use push notifications? Is every time I will know the pain that I went through or the joys that I went through, and I'm going to be able to think differently. But up until you really put it in a project, in a real project, not just in a presentation, yeah, you don't really realize that. And again, I mentioned that GC and in-app purchase could be pretty cool, could be a great piece of technology, but it's so much pain, so much, yeah, in all of ways.
But only if you talk about cross-platform. If you only do it like on iOS or on Mac, it's different. Or
no, for me it's not. For me, my personal, that has nothing to do with common technologies in this case. It's just I don't really like the things that I saw there. Many things. Maybe I use too much of StoreKit, that's the other thing. I use everything, like I use in-app hosted content. Maybe instead of hosted content, I should have had my own server and host my files. That would have solved the problem of the free in-app purchase, for example. Because why do I have a free in-app purchase? Because I download my files from Apple. I could put the files on my server and then download them. But I'm using also the benefits of Apple's server-side code being better than mine and security being better than mine. If I program, if I put the files on my server, there is a good amount of chance that somebody would find a way to get it, which in the case of this app, it's really no big deal. But in another app, that could be a problem. if something breaks on the side of Apple, there is a good amount of chance they are motivated to fix it if they have to fix it for 1 million developer. So that's why I try to use everything from Apple, and I try to avoid a server every time I can, if it's possible. Also, the reason why I wanted to use a hosted content and avoid a server is for scalability and things like that. So if from today to tomorrow I have like really lots of users and then I have a scaling problem, I don't think it's going to be the case, but who knows? I'm able to dream. I don't have to handle that. It's Apple's problem. And at one point I told to an Apple evangelist, which is not an evangelist anymore now, it's not because of me, to Paul Marcos, which is a developer again now. I told him, you know that all my files are 4 times on your server, and his only answer was, we can handle that. I can't imagine they can handle 4 times as much megabyte, but it's just stupid. For me as a developer, as a software engineer, it sounds so stupid for me to know that the same thing is going to be 6 times there, because it's the same thing.
If you use a server, do you have a standard procedure? Do you use AWS, Amazon S3, or do you have own servers?
I'm a Rails guy, so I'm Ruby on Rails guy. So I would develop this kind of app in Ruby on Rails, but I don't know if I would put the app on a. I mean, Ruby on Rails has also this asset thingy where you can also specify that their assets are somewhere else. So you could use OS, yeah, or something else. I don't know. All right, one more thing, and actually this is almost the last slide. One more thing Apple broke. Actually, this is a real mail. This is a real mail from, and I'm done. This is a real mail from Apple that says, I'm coming to the same conclusion that provisioning profile selection is broken for Mac apps in Xcode 5.1. I haven't found a combination of build settings yet that will add the apps environment entitlement to the app. I will show you what's the problem. And he says, on top of that, I have found one workflow that at least allows you to run the app from Xcode. That's awesome. Thank you very much. I'm going to show you that. Before that, I'm already going to say thank you because so the slide is finished. And this is Scotty at my conference last year, showing me his big number. You will have to understand that. By the way, this is the website of the app, which is already online, even though the app is not yet on the App Store, fflp.me. If you want to break the app, you can do that, but you will have to pay for every single in-app purchase just to try to break them. Though I'm going to show you one last thing, 2 things, and then we're done.
But it's already for Mac, or
No,
have you released it or not yet?
No, no, because I had to fix the problems, the rejections. So I'm about to submit it again.
Oh, because
Then up for 5, 6.
Reject 5, reject 6. No way.
do you think it's time to remove what they want you to remove and update it afterwards?
So yeah, that would be also an option. Sneaking. Yeah,
That's not sneaking. You're not doing anything bad. It's just they're not going to let you. They've rejected you so many times. It's going to be very difficult to push.
No, they rejected me only once for every single platform. Oh yeah, rejection.
But is it?
3 rejecting come at one time. They don't reject.
Okay.
Yeah. So then they don't reject. Luckily, they don't reject you, and then they come back, and then so on and so forth.
Because that's what I thought the other.
Yeah. But that can happen as well. Like I'm making fun out of they don't reject me for Game Center on the Mac, but I'm pretty sure they're going to do it. The next time I submit the app, they're going to say, oh, by the way, and that's the biggest. That's a real. It's hard to work with that. But anyway, this funny bug in Xcode is I'm going to have to change here to put you back in mirroring.
But it's true that if you don't have kids, you don't really get that it's a non-competitive way to be creative for them.
So this is the same code basically on 2 OS. I had this code working on 5.02 and then 5.1 came. And it's very simple app, which the only thing it does is really just register for push notification. And then when I get my token, I just print it. Otherwise, I print the error. And it's the same code. Again, it's in code, push Mac. And this is in code, Fflp push Mac. So it's the same code. If you run it here, as you can already see here, it starts the app and I get a token. and it is biz.pumcast@Fflp. If you run it on the other guy, you run it, and build starts error. And so what I discovered, it's very interesting, is that it works, by the way, when the app is archived, and when I submit the app to the App Store, it works. It's just that the process of Xcode embedding the provisioning profile on the fly is broken in 5.1. It's apparently kind of confirmed by Apple. So the last thing that I want to show you is about the difference between the two. Yeah, so this guy here is an NS page controller on iOS, on macOS. I think this is F7. Yeah. And so the way it works is I originally had in my credits explaining that it only works with 2-finger swipes. This guy only works with 2-finger swipes. This is the way NS page controller was built by Apple, interestingly enough, which is a new thing since only 10.8. And it reflects what the page, what UI page view controller does. So UI page view controller basically does the same. You do it this way, and and by the way, if you shake the app, this is a known bug. Then change the color on Mac. On macOS, when you click on the app, so it's different. Yeah, you cannot shake your Mac. Yeah. So you click. But the funny thing is that this works with swiping, obviously, because with the mouse it's harder. But this guy doesn't work. If you don't do anything, it doesn't work with clicking and dragging. When I first submitted the app to beta testers, a few of my friends came back and said the app doesn't work. And I was like, why? Don't you swipe? He says, yeah. So do you swipe with 2 fingers? I was like, what? With what? He said, oh no, I deactivated that. I went into this system preference, and then there is a trackpad, and they said, you know, this swipe pages between pages. No, I don't want that. So if you don't want that, the app was not working, and for a very long time I was showing you a message when you start the app, because I was reading that preference. I was telling you, I'm sorry, you need to activate that, and people started complaining, and I said, no, it's too much work, and finally it was probably 20 minutes of work. So what I do is now...
What are you doing if people are using, like me, I'm using a standard Logitech mouse?
Yeah, I guess that a few people were as crazy as that, so I adapted for those people. What I do is, you have the feeling that you swipe, actually, but you don't. Because if you do that, nothing happens. If I release it, it's going to happen. Okay. And it's actually pretty cheaper. The way I did is I have a click up, and then click down, click up, and then I check the X, and if it's more than 20 pixels, or then I go to the next page. If it's more than minus 20 pixels, then...
By the way, it's not so crazy to use the mouse additional, because the Logitech mouse for around €9 is very precise, which is the trackpad not.
I mean, I don't understand mice anymore. I cannot live. I have the Magic Trackpad at home. I even have the one from Logitech, because I thought it was a good idea of not having the damn batteries and having to plug it with the cable. Just the Logitech one drives me nuts because it's not precise at all. And also you cannot do that with the Logitech. You cannot do that. If you press Control and then 2-finger swipe, nothing happens. Logitech says it's normal. Or for example, on Logitech, the Logitech keyboard, you cannot do that. As soon as you press Shift, that goes away. So this is why I learned that you can actually press the tilde, that works. But if you press Shift, they release, and so that drove me nuts, and that's why it's hard to use anything as an app. Yeah, so I guess that's pretty much it, unless you guys have further questions to that whole funky... Oh, and by the way, yeah, because it's the Mac, yeah, you can go to that. And, yeah.
Awesome art, actually. It's really,
I'm glad that the guy is actually pretty cool drawer. So these are the Yeah, by the way, these are the 4 you get for free, and then you can buy, yeah. So, yeah, so, and then you go here and blah, blah, blah. And we plan, actually I have already a 4th character, and we plan to have like a new character every month and whatever, and we'll see how it goes. I don't know, it's yet another project, but it was funny also to do it on the iPad. It's also exactly the same as that. And the artwork, by the way, I should have mentioned that the designer does everything for the iPad in like 1024 by 768 points, so the double in pixel. And then on the iPhone it's just the same, but just there's less border. That's it. So we cut, everything is cutted here. There is nothing here. We actually even had a problem with the girl's dress. One of those girls has a dress. This is actually sometimes the 2-finger swipe is weird, by the way. So that girl's dress used to go up until there, and we realized that on the iPhone it actually wasn't working because it was too wide. So we really cut this, and it works wonderfully on the iPhone 3.5 inch. You have a little bit more space. And also on iPhone, on iOS, I'm only using add to X resolutions, except on the 3.5 inch, because otherwise there is not enough. And on the Mac, I'm using all the time the add to X, because there is no point in using smaller ones. And a Mac is also good enough to handle those big images.
What happens if you play it on a non-Retina display? It's then too big, or you scale it, or?
Yeah, actually there are 2 options. It's right now I'm just using the big thing, and it looks like my 11-inch MacBook Air handles that. It doesn't. It's not slow or whatever. Maybe it consumes more memory. The other option is to use an NS image with 2 bitmaps in it. So if you look at a TIFF on a Mac that is composed of 2 images, and the Mac is going to be smart enough to, when you resize the window, to adapt the image. That's pretty cool, actually. Yeah. It's a little bit what they do on iOS, except for the fact that it's very hard to resize your iPhone. Like, yeah. That's it.